8 bars of music, my career had ended, and people were so offended when they saw it. They go, "You're mocking Victor Wooten." Steve, you better learn to play that mother before you bring it back on my stage. Jaco, after hearing me play a few times, he goes, "You just don't get the tone." I said, "But you can't do that with your technique." And he looked at me and he said, "Steve, I don't need to do that. It involves the F word a lot." And when I say F word, I mean Fender. I've worked harder on that 8 bars than anything in my life. And he stands up and I look up and I think, oh my God, I'm about to get my ass whipped. And this is the lesson I learned. Never argue with a living legend.
Hi everyone, it's once again Lars Lehmann for Warwick in Germany, and today we have something very, very special for you. We have a guest from the USA, Steve Bailey, who is not only the head of bass department of the Berklee College of Music, but he's also played with iconic jazz stars like Dizzy Gillespie when he was like 20-something years old. He has worked with Willie Nelson, the Ripping Tones, plus he's also running a 2-bassist project called Bass Extremes with Victor Wooten. Welcome to Germany, man.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. How you been? What are you up to these days?
Well, thank you for that nice introduction. It seems like I'm always busy doing something. So I've got kind of 3 different jobs. One you mentioned as the head of the bass department at Berklee, and that's a full-time job in and of itself.
It sounds very stressful. Really.
It's not really. It's actually kind of fun and creative, right. And it's the largest bass department in the world, and we've got 20 instructors. Right. And a chair, an assistant chair, a staff. It's almost like a college inside of itself. It's all bass, many bass courses, and great faculty, John Patitucci, right. Victor Wooten, right. Artist in residence, and Linda O, and Mike Pope, and Lincoln Goins, and people that I really looked up to before I got there. Now we all work together and teach students from all over the world.
How many bass students do you have?
It's just over 300.
What?
Yeah. Most colleges in the United States, the ones I went to, had about 20 or 25, and we're right. 10 times, more than 10 times
That's
that big.
Amazing.
It really is. It's fun. I get to hear music every day. The students turn me on to, I always ask them, what do I need to listen to? Because I'm telling them what they should listen to, and there's so much new music and new bass players. So that keeps me busy on one side. The other side is I'm a bass player. Right. And so still, you mentioned the Bass Extremes with Victor Wooten. We started that over 30 years ago.
I know.
When it was bizarre and new. And we just 2022 released our latest album, and we toured a lot from that afterwards through 22 and 23, and still working together a lot in 2024. We have a project called the Bass Vault, right. which we're reopening and very soon. And I travel. I still do gigs. I was just in where was I? Austin, Texas last week, recording with the great Greg Bissonette, who always comes up in my conversations about great drummers. Somehow he's always in the mix, and I've got another project in a few weeks with one of my heroes on drums, Terry Bozzio.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and we've never actually worked together, so this life is always unfolding new challenges and opportunities.
What kind of music is that going to be
with
Terry?
Terry, as much as I would like to say that we're redoing heavy metal bebop by the Brecker Brothers, it's kind of Texas rock, and shuffles and things like that. And it's a unique project that I've been involved with a long time that includes Willie Nelson and other people from that world, and some other great musicians, but they've they've allowed me lately when I record with them to choose any drummer I want to work with, and we bring them in and we record. And it's just an ongoing project. It's so crazy. And this one we're doing in the Bahamas.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all flying down there in November, and it's so much fun that it does not feel like work.
Yeah.
Still.
Definitely sounds like a lot of
You
fun.
know what it's like. You find
absolutely.
it, sometimes there's those gigs that are work,
Yeah.
and you're going like, wow, you know, and there's other gigs that when it's over, you're like, wow, we just got started, and now it's over. So it's going to be one of those, I'm sure.
And of course, there's other skills who do not necessarily have to do with the way you play. I mean, being a great player is the one thing, but of course you have to be a great guy, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, we when we go on tour, maybe 2 hours is the gig.
Yeah.
Maybe an hour is the sound check.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're out on a tour bus, that's 21 more hours that we have to spend with a person.
Yeah, yeah.
And those skills of how we approach those 21 hours is important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to like make a list of the ideal things that we want or need, or that we want to be even, but a good sense of humor is important to being in a recording session where the pressure can be high, and a guy like Kenny can just say something and make everybody laugh. And then we forget about the pressure or the tension, the ability to be quiet, to just be silent.
Yeah, and not keep talking for hours and hours.
Yeah, and I'm sure it doesn't translate into German, but if you take the word silent and rearrange the letters in English, it spells listen.
Oh, yeah.
The exact same letters. So for me, that means they're like this. It's hard to listen if I'm not silent, especially on a tour bus. Nobody's talking all the time. We're just like in music. We're listening, reacting, and sometimes we're laying out, which I think is the best thing we can do for music and for other people. So yeah, there are skill sets. Being responsible, being on time when you say you're going to be there, not missing the bus call in the morning because my alarm didn't go off, or whatever it is. So yeah, there's a lot to it. Beyond the notes we play and the rhythms we play. And those things, I've seen a lot of great musicians who can play the instrument amazingly and do have a lot of skills, but they're not working.
Yeah.
And so when we take a look at it, and I've had people ask me, Steve, why am I not working? I've got this, I can do this, I can do that. And that's when I say you need to look at you. And I'm not going to criticize you, but take a look at the way you react to people and the way people react to you. And after that, then we can talk about it.
Oh, yeah. You're a virtuoso, and I would say a pioneer of the six-string bass. How did that evolve? How did that come up? I mean, obviously you didn't start on the six-string bass, right?
No, I didn't. I started on a four-string. My first bass cost $17, which is about €19, and that's what I learned to play on. And a lot of people don't remember the first song they played, but I remember.
What was it?
I'll sing it to you, and you tell me what it was.
Okay.
Do do. What is it? Do 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 do.
All Along the Watchtower?
Exactly. Every bass player knows that. Yep. You went. I played All Along the Watchtower with some guys. And they showed me the three notes on whatever string that was. I didn't know. And I remember leaving, that's all we played that day, just over and over. That's all we could play. But I had a blister on I played with this finger and that finger. And I came out and I had these white blisters on there. And I thought, I'm a bass player. So that started me. My mom got a bass, and one thing led to another. I already played trombone, so I understood notation, and a guy, Jack Austin, helped me relate that to the bass. So I learned to read music early, which was very fortunate later on to have that skill. And then somebody said, if you want to really learn your instrument, learn jazz. And I didn't know what that meant.
Are you actually from a musical family?
We had a piano, and my brother and I took piano lessons. He learned one song, and I may have learned two, but no, not a musical family. I think more important than having a musical family is having parents, and I've tried to be that same parent in life that supports what we're doing and understands, no, you don't want to be a musician, you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or anything but a musician. My God, you know how they are. So, so they were supportive, and when I used that $17 bass, and I repainted it with spray paint so many times, and I was only 12 years old at the time, so eventually got a Fender bass, and then I was on the road, and I got a Stuart Spectre, one of the number 7 Stuart Spectre, in a store in Connecticut. I was 17 years old on the road with a band, and traded my Fender for Stuart Spectre, and loved that instrument. And I played it. Then I got a fretless Stuart Spectre because I had heard Jaco Pastorius and Percy Jones with Brand X, and I thought, how do they do that? So I got a fretless, and eventually went to college, got a good gig opportunity with Paquito de Rivera. And this is all leading to your question, like my path to 6-string bass. Still playing 4-string with Dizzy Gillespie finally, and I was in Canada, and I had heard about a 5-string. This was 1983, and I'd heard about Anthony Jackson in New York, who was playing, I think, a 6-string at that point, and a guy named Jimmy Johnson on the West Coast, of course, playing a 5-string, a limbic. But I'd never seen one, and I met Jean Larrivée, the great acoustic guitar builder, and through another friend, helped connect us, and we designed a 5-string bass. He made it in 4 weeks from beginning to end, and I happened to be back in Canada. They delivered the bass to my hotel. I still have that bass. I took it out, I played it, and I went, this is easy. I thought it was going to be hard, my 4-string, and that low B had a low B on it. So I said, I'm taking this to the gig, and I took it to the gig that night, and we play a blues at first. This is with Dizzy Gillespie, like the legend, and I'm in the band, and too young to be there, but still excited and challenged, and we play a blues every night, straight no chaser. And I'm playing, and playing it on electric bass, and everything's great. And he hears these low notes. I was going down, we do it in F, so the 5 chords of C, and I'm on the B string down low. And he's turning around going, wow, because you got to remember, he hadn't heard those notes before. Nobody had played those notes on an electric bass before. He'd never heard them. So he was going, whoa. And then he looks and he notices 5 strings, and he was like, And I'm feeling all good and everything. And then the second song we played, and you know that feeling when you've just like made an impact on somebody. The second song we played was Manteca. Boom, ba-dee-dee goopy boom, don't nailed it. And he's digging that, but the bridge on Manteca goes through these complex chord changes, and the wheels completely came off, because that B, for a second I thought it was an E, and then I got lost, and then I got flustered and messed up everything. And I see him looking back like he's playing, looking back like that. And the audience out there, I'm thinking everybody's looking at me. I'm screwing up. And you know how in the moment, you're like, oh my God, my career is over right now.
Right now,
it's
right here.
It's done. I am sucking so bad. And then finally the A section, this is just 8 bars long.
Mm-hmm.
8 bars. In 8 bars of music, my career had ended. And so by the time we get back to the groove, I'm back going boom, ba-dee-dee-go-gee-go, and everything's fine. I'm playing, and Dizzy comes around, and he leans over in my ear as I'm playing, and he says, "Steve, you better learn to play that mother before you bring it back on my stage."
Right.
So I realized then that adding a string is not just adding a string.
Mm-hmm.
It's adding a level of difficulty that multiplies the strings. And it sounds kind of weird to say, but it's not just one more string. It's a whole different perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Especially learning the notes on the string and being able to read on it. And it's like adding, if you have 4 kids and you add 1 new kid,
it's going to change the whole system.
It's going to change the dynamic of everything. And so that's the way I had to approach it. Then I practiced it. I got really comfortable on it where I could close my eyes and see all the notes, and I knew the instrument. And then a year or 2 later, I heard bootleg of a guy named John Patitucci with Chick Corea.
Oh, man.
And a song called "Got a Match."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, how is he getting those high notes? It was a 6-string, and immediately I had to have a 6-string. So Larrivee, the same person that made the 5-string, made a 6-string, and it was a little bit crude. We didn't have anything to model it after, but it worked. I played it, and I remember meeting John Patitucci, and this was just 2 years later. And I'm playing 6-string. He goes, "Wow, you play 6-string," and nobody had one. We were at a NAMM show, and I had a 6-string fretless. And he was like, "Whoa!"
So yours was fretless by then already?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And because that was how I got into playing fretless is a whole nother story, and it's kind of funny, but I was playing 6-string fretless. And I had a fretted bass, but he was, 6-string fretless. And this is John Patitucci to me. He goes, "That's impossible.
Yeah.
That's crazy." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, it's not for me, but I'm glad you appreciate it." So that was like 1985 or 86 at that point. And it's been 6-string for me when I get to play my own music or with a band like the Rippingtons or Larry Carlton. They like the low notes and the high notes as long as I play mostly the middle notes. Like any good bass player should. But and fretless became my voice. But I was a fretted bass player who played a little bit of fretless until one night when I was 18 years old. Just getting ready to go to college, and I played a gig on my fretted bass, a top 40 gig in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and I didn't even have my fretless with me. It was something I was scared of because I'd heard Jaco and I heard all of that. And after the gig, the piano player was riding with me, so we load up the car with the equipment and everything, and we get in the car, and I'm backing up, and I feel the car kind of stop, like I hit a curb.
Oh, it's that story, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, that's weird. I don't remember a curb being there, but I pushed the gas, and we went over it, and as I'm looking over the thing, over the hood of the car, I see my bass laying there, and realized right then that I just backed over my instrument, and it's bad because I jumped out, and it was in a gig bag. And I learned one thing from this, is that when you pick up your bass in a gig bag and it sounds like a rain stick, do you know what a rain stick, you pick it up and it goes,
oh yeah.
Well, the sound of the tuners falling from the top of the gig bag to the bottom had a certain sound to it, and it's not a pleasant sound. So that was my Stuart Spector 4-string fretted, was just destroyed, and the only bass I had was a fretless. So the very next night on the gig, I had a lot of gigs at that time, I started playing them on fretless. And that same piano player, I remember the next night we were playing the Bee Gees, How Deep Is Your Love?
Okay.
And I'm playing it, and I'm singing some background vocals, and I'm playing, and I look over at the piano player, and he's got like the jazz face on. He's going like that, and I'm thinking, man, he's into it. And I said later, David, what's going on, man? You're really, he goes, I can't even tell what key we're in because you're not in tune. And I was like, what?
Oh, okay.
So that's when, starting then, I realized that intonation, if for no other reason, I'm going to learn to play this thing in tune. So when I look at David Kesterson, the piano player, he's looking over at me smiling and not cringing at what I was doing. So I realized then that to play it in tune was extremely important, and I set about everything I had to do, and it's to this day still a challenge sometimes to play in tune. Now, granted, I'm playing chords and I'm doing all these different things, but if it's not in tune, I'm the first to know, and you're the second to know, and it all happens at the same time. So keeping it in tune is important.
Yeah. You know, that's one thing I admire, you know, when listening to your playing, because you have such a unique voice. And do you think that's important, actually, for bass players to have that unique voice where you hear somebody play like 3 notes and you go, oh, that's Marcus, oh, that's Steve, oh, that's Jaco?
Well, thank you first. It's funny, and I've had this conversation a lot, and I've listened to a lot, but most of my career was built not having a unique voice. And still sometimes when I go in to play a session like I will with Terry Bozzio, my voice becomes very quiet as my focus is I'm playing a 4-string fretted bass in almost all of these sessions. As much as I love to play a 6-string fretless, I want to give the music what it needs more than what I need. I have a voice. I know I do. I know when I pick up an instrument, and I've heard Vic say it a million times, I can play 1 or 2 notes and he knows it's me. Which
Absolutely.
is, you know.
Totally agree.
And I don't think that's, I think we all have that. I think that music education, and I also think that learning bass, we learn to emulate other people first. We want to sound like Chris Squire. I did. I wanted to sound like Jethro Tull. You know, I wanted to get that tone, so I played with a pick.
Yeah.
So I'm emulating other people, and in jazz on upright bass, I want to sound like Ron Carter. I want to sound like Ray Brown, but I can't help but sound like me. If it's just like my voice right now. People who know me could have their eyes closed and know that it's me speaking. I recognize your voice. As soon as I heard you, we hadn't seen each other in years.
Yeah.
But we hug out there, and you say, hey, what's happening? And inside my mind, I goes, that's Lars. I mean, because I know your voice. So I think musically, and I approach this educationally as well, is that we already have our voice. Now we have to figure out how to let it out. When we speak, we have a unique voice. I think when we play, if we're able to finally get to a point on the instrument where we're free enough to be who we are, our voice comes out. In my case, I even remember in college, I was playing fretless. Of course, I listened to Jaco. And I listened to Percy Jones. And they were really, as far as from my perspective, and Alphonso Johnson, were the 3 pioneers at that point. I'm sure I'll think of a couple others, but those are the ones I was focused on in the like 1980 or 1981. or earlier, I didn't try to develop my own sound. And to most people who don't listen to a lot of bass, when I play, they go, "Oh, Jaco," you know, because that's what they associate with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I have it from credible authority that I did not sound like Jaco. And you ask me, what authority is that?
Yeah, who is that?
That was from Jaco.
Oh, really?
So in college at University of Miami, I got to know Jaco, and I got to know him quite well. And I told this story in the documentary. It's right at the end where the credits are playing the documentary that Rob Trujillo did.
Yeah.
And I tell this story, and Jaco would invite me to his house, and we would jam, and we would play, and we would hang out, and I'd get a phone call at 6:30 in the morning. "Hey, Steve, come on up, man. Just hanging out today, you know," and I would literally not go to classes, drive to Deerfield Beach to Jaco's house and hang out. We may be cutting the grass, we may be swimming at the beach, or we may be playing music. And I got comfortable with him, and I remember one time he used to love to play drums. And we're sitting there and we're just jamming around doing this, and all of a sudden he starts going, you know, the groove to Teen Town. Yeah. And he started playing it on the drums, and I'm playing bass, and I look over at him, and he goes, "Teen Town." I was like, and I just kept playing what I was playing, and finally he says, "Teen Town." And I'm still playing what I'm playing, kind of like, all right. And I'm playing, and he stops playing. He goes, "Let's play Teen Town." And I looked at him, and I said, "Jaco, I don't know Teen Town." And I said, I really, the only song I learned that you played was Donna Lee, and that's because it was written out in the real book. And I found out Charlie Parker wrote it. And so I learned it. And he looks at me kind of curious, because this was 1982.
Yeah.
And in 1982, every bass player, especially in South Florida, was playing Teen Town. They were playing Jaco's licks. They were playing them faster than him and whatever. And I was like, okay, now I've been exposed. And he stood up, and I remember this because he's much taller than me, and I'm standing there. He's sitting at the drums right about where you are, and he stands up, and I look up, and I think, oh my God, I'm about to get my ass whipped because I don't know Teen Town. And before I could think, he reaches and he hugged me.
Right.
And he hugged me for a second, and he held me, and he let go, and he said, "That's why I like playing with you."
Right.
He said, because, and this is such a quote. I've got a few quotes through the years from Dizzy, Paquito, and Jaco. And Jaco said to me, "That's why I like playing with you, because it's not like playing in front of a mirror." I realized I don't need to play like Jaco. I don't play like Jaco, and Jaco knows I don't play like Jaco, and that's why he digs me, or one reason. He likes having me around because it's not like playing in front of a mirror. So I took away from that, if I just be myself, people like Jaco might like me. Everybody wants to be liked.
Yeah.
No, but I realized musically that was powerful. That was the best lesson Jaco ever gave me. And we would sit around and talk about music, and he would show me, you know, some of the ways he approached the fingerboard, and I always wanted to know, you know, how he played that lick in Havana and how he fingered it, because those things would catch my ear.
Yeah.
And I did learn pieces of Jaco's playing that really challenged me. Like I learned the certain lines from solo of Bright Size Life, because I thought it was so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like I need to learn that melody, but when I go to play it, I sound nothing like him. I'm just playing those same notes.
Yeah.
With my own nuance. But thank you for acknowledging that. I learned it from Jaco. You know, I don't want to be a mirror for anybody, because that's boring. I mean, some people like to stand in front of the mirror and look at themselves. I would rather not be that reflection of somebody else. I'd like to reflect whatever it is I do.
When you're teaching, your students, young kids, 20-something, do you think it's important for those guys to deal with those compositions, to play, to have Teen Town down, to have Donna Lee down? Isn't it, if you would not do it, isn't that like studying philosophy and not reading Plato?
Is it not reading Plato or not memorizing Plato? There's a difference.
I know,
And I tell students, I've had students, we've never learned Teen Town. That is sacred to me. I have never learned it. I never did. I actually, when I first got to Berklee as the chair, they were having a big bass event, and I was just visiting campus, and a guy who was leading the event said, "Can you come out and play with us?" It was a group of bass players, students, and everything, and I said, "Sure, I'm happy to." We didn't discuss what we're going to play or anything, and I didn't want to know. I like being surprised. So he introduced me. I come out on stage, and we'd like to introduce Steve Berklee and our new chair of the bass department. The audience is packed with bass players, and all of a sudden,
there it was
again. And I turned around and I went, okay. And it was, of course, it was Teen Town, and even everybody expected I have to know Teen Town. And I'm just sitting there, just like when I was playing with Jaco. It was so funny because I'm sitting there and I'm not really playing yet. Everybody's got their thing going, and they're waiting for me to come in with the melody. And occasionally the drummer would go, da-da, and I just wouldn't do anything. And finally Jim's over like, "It's Teen Town." And I go, I know it's, and this is the audience looking at me, and I'm going, I know it's Teen Town. He goes, well, let's play it. And I looked at him and I said, "I don't know Teen Town." And he was like, "What?" And you know what I did? Because I could, I turned around and I went, everybody stopped. And I said to the audience, I said, "I need to tell you a story that I think is going to be educational and will explain why all of you are curious that Steve Berklee, the new chair of our bass department, doesn't even know Teen Town." So I told them the story about Jaco. And I said, "I will never learn Teen Town. You can hug me all you want and tell me how important it is, but Jaco told me, he dug me because I don't know Teen Town." Having said that, I think transcription, I think learning other people's bass lines, which I did, like I said, I would find the parts of Jaco that were intriguing to me, and I learned those. And I would look at I learned these melodies, and I would learn that. And I also learned Bright Side's Life, the song, because it was fun to play. And I think that is important. Absolutely. Emulation is important. I did it with Ron Carter. I did it with Ray Brown. I did it with Chris Squire, of learning roundabout and how to make it sound like him. I did it even with Pino. When I was already a professional on the road when I heard Pino with Paul Young. Oh yeah. And I was going like, wow, people thinks that sounds like Jaco, but it doesn't. No, that's Pino in his way. So I think it is important to learn and emulate, but at some point, and I tell students this all the time, is that eventually your voice is there. So don't stuff it down inside of you with other voices that sound like this, or a voice that sounds like this, because it's not my voice. Find your voice and let it come out. May not need it all the time, may not need it much of the time, but you still want to have your own voice.
This actually reminds me of a quote by the late T.M. Stevens, who said, "Learn the rules and break them."
Yeah.
Which I like very much.
TM, I mean, that's I forget Einstein or somebody, but TM was full of great quotes, and in fact, I had so much fun with him here in this building so many times. But there is so much truth to that of I want to learn everything I can learn, and that frees me to break rules. But if I don't know the rules, I don't know when they're broken.
Right.
And a lot of music that I've played in my life is built on rules. Of when I played with a symphony orchestra, I'm playing the rules of 150 years ago.
For sure.
No matter who I'm playing with, if I'm playing with a blues band, there are rules.
Oh,
I can't break those rules. I have to honor them and then find a way. If I want to break them, at least I understand what they are. So TM is absolutely correct. People tell you there are no rules. Of course there are rules. I mean, we get on the road to drive a car.
Right.
There are rules. We break them. We can have fun breaking them, but they can have consequences too.
Yeah.
Like anything else. So, yeah, learn the rules, break them as needed, but you have to sometimes come back to those. That an E fits nicely over a C when it's a major seventh chord. And an E flat is breaking the rule, and it's also losing the gig.
It's about cliches, isn't it?
I wouldn't call it a cliche. I would say that it is the tradition. Like if I'm on a country gig, I hated country music when I was a kid. I grew up in South Carolina, which is boom, 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 ding, 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 ding. That is a cliche, but it's also the function of the music. And it wasn't until many years later I'm in a Nashville recording studio with the very pianist who originated that root fifth style of movement, of working with him. I realized this is not a cliche. This is an art form that has rules, has very strict rules that most of us don't understand the rules until we are really inside of a country music song, of realizing there are times to go boom, boom, root, fifth. But there are other times where we go root, root to the four chord. We don't go root, fifth, and then to four. It's a rare thing, but we do it naturally because we're not country music experts. So yeah, there's traditions. In a walking blues.
It's a more positive way to put it.
Yeah. Cliche kind of maybe has some negative connotations, but we have to study the music. I mean, I got fired in college from a salsa band, and I played the notes all right. I could read. I was such a good reader, and still love reading. I do it even when I don't need to do it. I open music and I love to read and see what's inside of 200-year-old music or whatever. But I got fired from that gig because, and this guy did me the best favor. I wish everybody did it. When you get fired from a job, tell me why. And I remember at the end of this gig, I'm like nailing it. I felt like boom, goom, ging, goom, goom, boom, goom, bing, ding, reading all of that stuff. And at the end, the trombone player, he comes to me, he says, "Steve, thank you for tonight." He goes, "Tomorrow night is not happening." And I went, "What do you mean not? We're supposed to play Friday and Saturday." And he said, did the band get fired? And he said, "No, the band will still be here, but you won't." And I went, "Oh, you mean I'm fired?" And I said, "Why?" And instead of him saying, "Oh, it's just not right," he told me. He said, "You know, you're playing all the right notes, but it doesn't feel right." And he said, "Have you listened to a lot of salsa music and Latin music?" I said, "Not really." And I lived in Miami.
And that was the problem.
He said,
Right.
"Yeah, you don't understand the accent. You don't understand how to the tone." My tone was like a jazz guy. And I said, "Thank you," and I left, and I was humiliated. I was hurt. I drove home that night, and I had a choice to make. Number one, I could say, Latin music sucks. I don't need it. You know, I got fired. It's okay. There's plenty of other styles of music. Or, and I'm so grateful that I did this, I said, I'm going to learn to play that. I don't want to be fired for that. It shouldn't be that hard. So I tuned every radio station in my car to Puerto Rican music, Cuban music, Colombian music. You could get it all in Miami, all of these radio stations.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even listen to English in my car anymore. It was all in Spanish. All the music was in Spanish. So I started listening to it going, oh yeah. And the length of the notes, the tone, all of that started to become a part of me. And literally a year later, I got the gig with Paquito de Rivera. And about 6 months after that, we are back in Miami playing for some big gig.
Yeah.
And we had an opening band. And I get to sound check late. Guess who our opening band was? That band.
The band that fired
me.
you?
Yeah. And the trombone player is right there, the same guy that fired me. And he didn't know I was playing with Paquito. We come in, and they're doing their sound check.
Yeah.
And we're late, and we're getting there, and I'm walking up to the stage, and he looks at me carrying the bass, and he recognized me immediately as this gringo, white, long-haired kid that came in. And there's Paquito, and there's Daniel Ponce, and there's Ignacio Berroa, all these heroes of Cuban music. And I'm with them, and I see him, and I look at him, and I come walking down. And before he could say anything, because he looked kind of scared, like I was going to say, ha ha, I put out my hand, and I said, thank you. And he goes, for what? And I said, for telling me that night why you fired me.
Yeah.
Because if you had not been honest with me, I would have not gone on the journey I went, and I wouldn't be walking in the room with these guys. And I've always wanted to thank you for that.
Yeah.
And now I get the chance. And he was like, whoa, you don't hear that very often. And, when you thank somebody for firing, I thanked him for firing me because it created a reaction that was powerful for me. It changed my life.
Yeah.
Because that gig led to playing with Dizzy Gillespie, which led to the next gig, which led to me moving. All of my career kind of was at this place by getting fired on that gig. Like I could either go that direction or I could have gone this direction. Now that direction may have been cool too, but I chose the path of what I call the path of resistance.
Yeah.
Meaning that it was difficult, and I had to swallow my pride, as we say, and I had to really learn something. But it changed my life.
Listen, man, we need to talk about your playing technique. Like, for instance, the artificial harmonics. Did that come from Jaco's melody in Birdland? Or
it did, actually.
Really?
Yeah. It came from that, but in 1975 or 76, when I first heard that, when the album came out, and it was no CDs then, it was an album, and I was listening to that, and I was like, whoa, is that a bass?
Yeah.
Because I knew where harmonics were, and I heard Portrait of Tracy, and that made sense to me for the most part. Some of those harmonics, like I said, figuring it out, but I never learned Portrait of Tracy. I just learned pieces of it that made sense to me. It's ironic because Vic and I made this crazy recording of Portrait of Tracy later that is so different from the original that Jaco would be smiling, I'm sure. But I heard trying to figure that out was luckily I had a teacher, but guess what? He was a classical guitarist. And he said it sounds like artificial harmonics. That's what he called them.
Yeah.
And it's a technique on classical guitar that involved not the way Jaco did it. I didn't know how Jaco did it.
Jaco would do this, right?
But you didn't know that.
Of course.
Nobody knew that until there was YouTube or concert videos or somebody telling him, I saw Jaco do it. I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Nobody has seen anything. All we did was hear it. And the guitar player said, in classical music, we touch an octave above the note that we finger and we pluck with our thumb.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, that's kind of cool. And I started doing it. And he would show me how it worked just for chiming notes. But I thought, okay, but I'm going to touch it with my index finger because that makes sense. If I'm going to touch anything or point at something, I use this finger. It's my pointer, so I can be accurate with it. But I've been working on this 3-finger right-hand technique, and I thought maybe I can pluck with these because it seems like I can do more with these two than I can just do with my thumb. So I started working on it that way and figured out the way he played that melody. And then really quickly, I realized that, wow, I can play chords with this, you know. I can play the upper partials of the harmonics, which I did a little example on, we recorded here on video a lesson of me doing that yesterday. And it's so funny though, this comes back to Jaco, because years later, after I figured this out, 4 years later, I knew Jaco, and that was another big lesson we had. And I remember sitting there with him, and he goes, because he first heard me play on a gig. He happened to be hanging out there, and he heard me play. He left the gig. I thought, okay, well, you know, whatever. I just met him, and an hour later, he came back with his bass. Literally walked up on stage, jumped on the stage, unplugged my upright bass, plugged in, and this is in the middle of a song that we're playing, and he said, let's play. And that started this whole friendship and musical thing. So that's a whole nother story, that I got fired from that gig that night. Another getting fired story that led to some amazing stuff. And Jaco was the root cause of that. That's another story. We'll come back to that if we have time. The artificial harmonics I'd been working on, and it actually created a solo bass piece for my admission to college, which they had never heard before. And one guy said, how did you multi-track all of these parts? Because multi-track didn't exist outside of recording studios back then. And I said, well, I played them at the same time. And he went, really? I said, yeah. And I could tell he didn't believe me, but I still got in college. Anyway, Jaco, after hearing me play a few times, he goes, you know, the way you do these artificial harmonics, he goes, it just doesn't have the right tone. I was like, what? And he picks up the bass, and he starts playing his version, well, the version of Birdland, and he's just, you know, doing his technique, and I was like, wow. And I said, and this is the lesson I learned more than anything, is never argue with a living legend. There's just no point in it. But I was 22 years old. I said, but Jaco, if you're going to, like I just told you, and I went ding, 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 ding. I said, if I'm going to be accurate with something, I point at it. I don't point with my thumb. I point with my index finger. To me, that makes more sense. I can be more accurate. And he said, yeah, but it doesn't have the right tone. And he goes, and he moves his hand up and finds some different, and it was Jaco. You're going like, whoa, that's the real thing. And I said, but Jaco, my second attack. And I said, with my finger, if I finger, let's say, a G, a B, and a D, a G triad over the 4 strings, and I was playing 4-string bass at the time, I said, I can rake the same shape there and get and get an arpeggio. And he said, yeah, you can do that, but it just doesn't have the right tone. And he starts going, and he just keeps getting more intense with the harmonics. And he does his thing and kind of looks at me, and I said, but Jaco. And it was kind of, I said, using the double notes and my thumb is free, I can play harmonics and a bass line at the same time. And so I demonstrated, and maybe I'll do it in a little bit, of how I could play octaves and harmonics on top of it. And he said, yeah, but you just don't get the tone. And I said, but you can't.
Love that.
This is the key response. I said, but you can't do that with your technique. And he looked at me and he said, oh gosh, I wish I had video back then. He said, Steve, I don't need to do that. Years later, I thought, what if he said, Steve, those are great ideas. I'm going to start doing that. And then I'd be sitting here trying to make you believe that I showed Jaco this new technique that he did with artificial harmonics. So glad he was like, nah, I don't need to do that, because if he had taken it and developed it, all I would be was like, hey, I did it first. And everybody's like, sure you did.
Yeah,
right.
Listen, man, we really need to talk about your amazing 6-string fretless bass by Warwick.
Thank you.
How did that happen? Because you have been working with other companies before, right?
Yeah, my first signature bass was with Aria.
Yeah,
years ago.
I remember that one.
Maybe 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And they were an amazing company. Before that, I was with Hartfield. It was my first endorsement. Hartfield was Fender. And that was my first go around with Fender. They were one of the few companies making a 6-string bass, and they custom made 6-string fretless for me after the Larrivee, the original one. Technically, I was a Fender endorser in 1988 or somewhere around there, and there were ads and that was cool. But then they dropped Hartfield. And Hartfield was a Japanese brand that Fender imported and distributed. So I was looking, and then ended up with Aria, which was wonderful, and for about 10 years. And then some things happened in the business. And the next thing I know, I'm talking to Fender again. I'll drop the F-bomb, the Fender bomb, quite a few times here, so please don't anybody get offended. And it started this relationship again with Fender. They were interested in doing a 6-string bass, and they came to me, which I was flattered and honored, and we set about designing a bass. And it was I got to say, it was fun, because at the time I was working with a designer at Fender who was also working with Eric Johnson, great guitarist, at the same time. So we were working on pickups together, and that part of the Fender experience was fun. And finally it came to production, and it was everything that I wanted for the most part. I let them convince me not to do certain things, but I love that bass. I still love that bass, the way it feels. Let me put it back up a minute. I met Hans Peter years before at a dinner, and we both remember where we met. It was at a dinner in Nashville in a summer NAMM way in the 90s. I can't remember the exact year, but it was 30 years ago. And we stayed friends, and whenever we'd see each other at shows, we would talk. And so I'd done this thing with Fender. This was around 2009, 2010. The bass was released, it was selling, everything was good. But you know how when you're in a relationship, whether it's with a person or a company, and it feels so corporate, like there was no music in that relationship. And I say music business? Like that. It was all business. It was Fender had grown. When I was with them the first time, they were a small company. They had just been bought back by the employees. Schultz was the president. He was fun. He was a musician, and it was great. And I thought the second trip with Fender would be like that, but it wasn't. There were lawyers and all kinds of people with suits, and all my friends were with them at the time. A lot of people that my heroes had signature instruments, so I kept thinking this is going to be great. So I'm going through these things with the company, like in a relationship where you start wondering, like, okay, everything's good, the endorsement's good, the royalties are good, everything's good. It just doesn't feel right. And then I happened to talk to Hans Peter on the phone, and I can't remember why, or maybe we emailed, and he said, are you going to be at NAMM? And I said, I don't know. Fender's so big, and they last year they did a big thing with the release of my instrument, but this year he goes, I don't think I'm going out. I think they have other people going. He said, do you want to go? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, well, come be Warwick's guest at NAMM. And meanwhile, it's kind of like, I'm in one relationship, but I'm going to be I said, this has nothing to do with endorsing or anything. He goes, no. He goes, I just want you to have a good time. I like you. I like hanging out with you.
Yeah.
Just come and hang with us. Jonas Helborg is here. We'll just have a good time, and you can go do your things at Fender and whatever. Just come hang. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I went there, and I hung out with Hans Peter at the NAMM show and with Jonas and with the whole Warwick family. And I remember at the end of it, it dawned on me. And maybe you'll understand that here. I know IBM and Apple. One is a huge company at the time, IBM, biggest computer company, but it was very austere and very, like the programs are it was like Fender for me. It felt stiff. And then there was Apple. Apple came along, Steve Jobs and all these guys. They were free thinkers.
Yeah.
They were having fun.
Computer
they were doing
geeks.
the US Festival. They were geeks at one side, but the other time they were just having fun, and they were kind of like, that was the difference. For me, Fender felt like IBM, and Warwick felt like Apple. And it was creative. It was like, hey, what can you think of? You know, how can we work together? And I got so excited after that show. There was no offers made. Hans Peter, he always said, if you ever want to come our way, we would welcome you. So I started thinking about it, and I remember that year some things going on with my endorsement, and finding out that other artists that had been with Fender a long time, bass players, signature artists like myself, had been dropped from Fender without even a mention. I mean, no email to them letting them know. They would just, somebody would say, hey, you're not in the catalog anymore. And then they would follow up and go, wow, I've been dropped from the company, and they never even told me.
What?
Yeah. And so I wrote them a letter and asked about that, and asked about a few other things. It never was clear on the why or any of that. And I started talking to Hans Peter, and I was going like, are you for real about us getting together and doing something? He goes, absolutely. He goes, what do you want? You want to come over and visit? We've got this amazing place in Germany. Yeah. I hadn't been here yet, and the factory was already here. It wasn't quite like this. It has expanded since. I remember coming over, and I said, yeah, I'll come over, and let's talk. Let's figure out what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
And 5 days later or so, I went and came back in about 4 days, and that's when I made my mind up. I was like, I don't know where this is going to go with Warwick. I just know it's going to be fun wherever it goes. And so I wrote a letter to Fender and told them that I would not be renewing my contract. Evidently, that had never happened. That's what they told me. The lawyers wrote back and said, well, you can't really do that. We're set up now. We've set up to make 6-string necks. We've never done that, 6-string bass necks. We had to teach our people how to do an asymmetric fingerboard as far as the measurements of it. It was a special instrument, and they basically said, you can't do that. And I said, well, yeah, I'm looking at the contract. I can do that, and this is what I'm doing. And they said, well, nobody's done that to us. And I went, well, okay, but I am. And I did not renew my contract officially. I wrote back Hans Peter and I said, I just resigned from Fender. What are we going to do? And I've been here ever since. Yeah. It was so much fun from the beginning, and still is. You know, through the pandemic, things changed in the business, but especially at this point in my life. But I said this 10 or 15 years ago. I was at a point in my career where an endorsement has to be two things. It has to be good for both of us, and I have to feel confident that I can bring something to Warwick that's worthwhile. A lot of young people I talk to at Berklee, they're all about endorsements. And in their mind, an endorsement is free stuff, and what can the company do for me?
Of course, yeah. And
in my mind, I've learned that what can I do for you, and what can you do for me? And that's something that Hans Peter and I understood early on. and we talked about it, and it felt like just a healthy relationship as opposed to a one-sided relationship. You know, give me a bunch of stuff and I'll just do my thing. But with Hans Peter, it was like, okay, let's work together on some projects. And that's where, by accident, the Fuss on the Bus series started. And I'm telling you, Google that stuff with Bootsy Collins and
that was
Larry
so
Graham.
Great.
That was an accident. They invited me to New York City. And just to hang out. Hans Peter says, come up to New York and just hang out and we'll have fun. And he said, Bootsy's going to be there, Larry Graham's going to be there. And I said, stop, I'm down. And there's an old picture of us all sitting on these amps, and I'm the only one without a bass because I did not want to commit. At that point, we hadn't worked out details and design and all of that. And I said, I'm not going to hold something I'm not playing. That's not right. So if you look at that old picture, I'm sitting on the amp, just digging the amp, and Divinity is there, and Jonas and Larry and Bootsy all holding basses. But I happened to bring, I'm way into recording technology, and I had my laptop and I had a interface, and I said, HP, do you mind, like the energy is so amazing here, can I capture some of it on audio? And he said, well, sure, you know, do.
What a great idea, man.
Yeah, and because they're all there, and then it was up to me, and I'd done a lot of multi-bass stuff for Bass Player magazine over the years. I'm really, and with Victor, I was comfortable how two bass players work together. The tricky part was explaining that to Bootsy and Larry Graham, my heroes. But and Ryan Martini, and I recorded him in the hotel room and got all of these guys on the bus and just compiled this footage of everybody hanging out. Had video, you know, old video cameras, not iPhones at the time, just recording everything. And in the end, I took all the footage back and I said, HP, I think there's something special here. And I took it back to Myrtle Beach, to my studio there, and I started listening to it. And T.M. Stevens and John B. Williams, everybody recorded parts of us having fun. And there was video of Larry and Bootsy singing together. And it was crazy how cool it was. And I put it all together into this thing, and I sent it to HP, and I said, what do you think of something like this? And it had really never been done. And I'm not that innovative, but I just had an idea because we're all sitting on this bus and everybody's so musical, and TM's over there, he's got this groove going, and I'm going, this should be recorded, you know, and I have a way to multi-track it and make it sound like an album. And we did that, and that ended up being Fuss on the Bus 1, which there are excerpts all over the internet, which led to the next one in San Francisco, like going upscale. Now Fuss on the Bus 2, we recorded under the Golden Gate Bridge with all of these guys on the bus. And I don't know if you've seen the interview I did with Larry Graham, Verdine White, and Bootsy Collins together. And oh man, amazing, amazing.
Give me goosebumps, right?
Yeah, me too. And one thing led to another. And Rob Trujillo there, and Lee Sklar was there, and duets with them, and we put that together. That became a big production. They had a film crew there at this point recording, and it became a thing. And meanwhile, I had finalized my deal with Warwick, and at that point, I was playing a Warwick bass. A year later, that led to the third Fuss on the Bus big project, which we recorded here. On a big bus that HP had found somewhere, like a party bus or something. Only HP could find this thing in where we are in Germany, and there's some amazing stuff on there. So that is just a corner piece of what Warwick had going on. Like that's the kind of fun that I remember for the rest of my life. And it's musical fun. The third one was focused on education because we had started the Warwick bass camps here with some of the greatest bass instructors from around the world all together. And that Fuss on the Bus 3 was done with education in mind, but it was still just fun, fun and entertaining, a lot of different musicians at this one. But I just love the fact that Hans-Peter and now Nico are all still creatively minded, and what we can do together, how the future looks, and remembering and laughing at the past and learning from the past, but moving forward. And this bass.
Yeah, tell me about this bass.
Yeah,
what's special about it?
I would say everything. They let me. I started with a streamer body because I love the shape of it. It's just classic already. And I incorporated a lot of ideas that I'd used before. The spacing is a little bit wide, but not extremely Fender wide. The snakewood fingerboard sustains like nothing I've ever used.
Yeah, because snakewood is a very dense wood, isn't it? It's like ebony, but even harder than that?
Harder than ebony. So it's like having, not like a glass fingerboard because it still sounds like wood, but this is the wood they use for a lot of violin bows and stuff. It's really hard and stiff and stays consistent. But I love that part of it. It has the bass lines or Seymour Duncan fundamental fretless pickups that I designed about 15 years before.
Okay.
Was able to incorporate those into it. And it's just a beautiful, simple instrument. Nothing has evolved on the string spacing or the fingerboards or the pickups or anything, but cosmetically I've kind of evolved. And I had played black a lot, and I had seen at NAMM some amazing finishes that Warwick was getting into, and one was a rust finish. I don't have that one here. I'm sure you'll cut it in. But and I remember I said, HP, I got to have a bass like that. Yeah. I took it to NAMM.
Looks so cool.
Guess who's the first person to see it was? Robert Trujillo.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, dude, that's metal. That's real metal. Now he's got tons of them that look like that. But I think I was the first bass player to have it, this rust finish. And then I was hanging with Victor Wooten, and I had seen at NAMM something they had done that was kind of a yin-yang, and that's his trademark.
Yeah, I know, the yin-yang bass.
So we've been friends so long. I said, this is part goof on him, like mocking him in a way, but not
like
not
an homage?
Yeah, let's call it an homage. Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. HP, I said, I need that in a 6-string, and I couldn't believe how amazing it was. I couldn't believe it. And people were so offended. When they saw it, they go, "You're mocking Victor Wooten, or you're copying his."
Yeah.
I said, "No, this is fun." And
it's just because you love the guy so much.
That was my thing. But there was one particular photographer, and you know who you are very well. You know who you are. She wouldn't photograph us because she's good friends with Victor and happened to be married to me.
Oh, oops.
And an amazing photographer. And she said, I am not going to do that. You are mocking your friend Victor.
She got upset by that model?
Yeah. And I had to take pictures of it at Berklee. Vic was there. I had to go hire an outside photographer. And I had a great one in my family. And then he came in and photographed him, and Vic was like, "Cool, man." Totally, you know, Vic is like, he sees the positive in everything.
Yeah.
And you could look at this and go, "Oh, you're just capitalizing or mocking or whatever you're doing." Anyway, I love that bass. It sits in my office at Berklee.
Yeah.
And but the next evolution was we were touring a lot, and I was playing a lot. And I just wanted something lighter. I was on a session for about 5 or 6 hours, and I thought, wonder if we can do one lighter. And the guys at Warwick, Marcus and HP, said, how about we chamber a body?
Right.
So there was a blue one before this one and this one where some of the body is chambered out, and it's maybe a 30 or 40 pounds lighter. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know how much lighter it is. It's a little bit, but it makes a difference when I hold it for 3 or 4 hours when I'm standing up.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to do that.
So this guy's got the chambering, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It changes the tone a little bit.
Yeah. As in what? Can you describe that?
Well, the low end in some notes sounds better on both basses. In the upper register, it has a little bit different tone. It's not better or worse, but it's not as, it's literally, and this is not worse, but it's more hollow than, and I don't notice it so much on the low end, but on the upper end, it's not as pointed as the black ones, the full solid bodies. And I like them both. It's different. And I don't know how to explain it other than just like the body of the bass. The tone has an inside to it, like bread that's baked and has a fluffy center. And the other, the blacker bass is more like a bagel with no hole. It's some thick bread you tear through, and it just depends. Like for some tracks, I want that upper register piercing and to cut through. The harmonics come out great on both of them. So that works fine either way. But there is I mainly notice the difference only in the upper register.
How many of those beasts do you own?
It probably to some people sounds like an indulgence, like how many cars do you have? Well, you can only drive one. I love the fact that I can just, because they're so consistent, and this gets back to the instrument, I don't have a favorite.
You don't?
I don't have a favorite Warwick. To me, I can pick up any of them anytime. Like my bass is at my studio in South Carolina. I might not see them for a month or two. I go down and pick them up. It feels like home. This bass travels with me most of the time. It stays in a case when it's not traveling. And I pick it up. When I took it out here, I hadn't had it out in 4 or 5 weeks since I was last in Europe.
And you didn't have to redo the setup?
No, sometimes I have to tune it. No. It's fretless. Who cares if it's in tune? No, but they are so consistent. And that's one thing I love about them is that I don't have a favorite. They all play great. The fretted ones play great. And I do have fretted because I love that. I've got a 5-string that I love and 4 strings, and they're all consistent. So it may seem like this is my favorite today. But when I get to South Carolina or Texas, where I keep one there for that one band I was telling you about, where I always play my old basses that they love, that classic old P bass kind of tone. But occasionally they want some fretless, and I pull that out, and they love it, and we use it on a track, and then it's always there. Always consistent. You know, it's like a great relationship with an instrument. It just always feels amazing and good, and makes me want to play it.
Right. What a great way to end this video, Steve. I want to thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure, man.
Reconnecting with you. So cool.
Thanks so much.
Let's do it again.
I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched all the way through the end, congratulations, you made it. Thanks for watching. We have new content coming up every now and then, so please subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell for notifications on new videos. We hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.